What's up, Yugi Nation? It's your boy Enzo, and we all know 90s is a year filled with a lot of innovation in terms of music, sports, movies, culture, and of course, gaming. The 90s was an era of great entertainment, and because of this, there's a lot of iconic games because of these historic gaming devices. So without further ado, let's check them out. First off, the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo, or also known as the Super NES, is a 16-home video game console developed by Nintendo in 1990 and was first released in Japan and South Korea. It is the redesigned version of Super Famicom. All of NES consoles mostly come in gray with slightly different shades. All versions sport a top loading slot for game cartridges, and the shape of the slot differs between regions. During its launch in Japan, only two games were initially available, and those were Super Mario World and F-Zero. But the third game, Bomboozle, was later released during the launch week. Game & Watch is one of Nintendo's handheld electric game console series that was released from 1980 to 1991. There's a legend that says Nintendo engineer Gunpei Yokai's inspiration for creating G&W is when he observed a bored Japanese salaryman absent-mindedly fingering his pocket calculator while traveling to work. Each G&W features a single game to be played on an LCD screen. It comes with 10 series: Silver, Gold, Widescreen, Multi-Screen, U-Widescreen, Tabletop, Panorama, Super Color, Micro Versus System, and Crystal Screen. G&W has a total of 60 games including Mickey Mouse, Popeye, and everybody's favorite monkey, Donkey Kong. Next up is the classic Brick Game. Brick Game is a traditional LCD electronic handheld game that was first introduced in China and gained popularity in the early 1990s. It displays games in a 10x20 grid screen, the same grid size used in Tetris. It uses two AA batteries and comes with many different sizes and shapes. It has been an alternative to Nintendo's Game Boy. This one is more affordable and readily available in the market at the time. Next is the Nintendo 64. Nintendo 64, or N64, is a home video game console developed by Nintendo. It was first released in June 1996 in Japan, September 1996 in North America, and March 1997 in Europe and Australia. The N64 is Nintendo's first gaming console to sport 4 controller ports that can handle a 4-player split screen without significant slowdown. Its games are ROM cartridge based that varies from 4 to 64 MB. There's a total of 388 games released for this console. Although there are some titles that were exclusive to Japan, some famous games for this console include Super Mario 64, which is the first in the Super Mario series to feature a 3D gameplay, and GoldenEye 007, which paved the way for the evolution of the first-person shooter. Moving on, the PlayStation 1. Sony's original PlayStation was launched on December 3, 1994, and it has sold 100 units on the first day, and then 2 million units after 6 months on the market. Fun fact, PlayStation was supposed to be a partnership work between Nintendo and Sony. In 1988, Nintendo approached Sony to develop a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo and tentatively titled it PlayStation, or SNES CD. Contracts were signed. Fast forward to 1991, the product PlayStation was supposed to have its debut at the Consumer Electronics Show, or CES. However, Nintendo's president at the time, Hiroshi Yamauchi, that was signed in 1988 and realized that the whole deal gave Sony complete power over all the titles written on the SNES CD-ROM format. And of course, he wasn't okay with it. So, on the day of the CES, Nintendo chairman Howard Lincoln announced that they are leaving all previous projects that they collaborated with Sony and now allied with Philips. Despite that, Sony PlayStation paved the way for the video game industry in 1994, as Nintendo and Sega were dominant in the early 1990s. It also played an essential role in transitioning the industry away from 2D graphics to real-time 3D rendering. Its usage of compact disc format allowed it to produce high-fidelity, full-motion video. Apart from that, games are saved with the use of memory cards, which was only 128 kilobytes in size. Some famous games from the PS1 include the Resident Evil series, the Tekken series, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, Crash Bandicoot, and many more. Up next is the Game Boy, or also known as Tata Game Boy in Southeast Asia. It's an 8-bit handheld video game console developed by Nintendo. It was released in Japan in April 21, August 1989 in North America, and 1990 in Europe. It was created by the same guys who developed the Game & Watch series. At launch, you can either get a standalone unit or a bundled one with free games like Super Mario Land or Tetris. The Game Boy has 4 main controls in playing labeled A, B, Select, Start, and a directional pad. It has volume control dial on its right side and a similar knob to adjust the contrast on the left side. The sliding on and off switch in the cartridge slot can be found at the top. It is the first handheld game to use video game cartridges. On July 21, 1996, Nintendo released the Game Boy Pocket, which is a smaller and lighter unit that only needs fewer batteries. The screen was changed to an actual black and white display rather than the pea-soup monochromatic display of the original Game Boy. Then on April 14, 1996, Nintendo launched the Game Boy Light, which only became available in Japan. It is slightly bigger than the Game Boy Pocket and features an electroluminescent backlight, and it uses 2 AA batteries. Next is probably the weirdest, Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn is a 32-bit game compact disc-based system developed by Sega in 1994. It was released on November 22, 1994 in Japan, May 11, 1995 in North America, and July 8, 1995 in Europe. It was a key player in what is now widely known as the 5th generation of video game consoles. At the time, 2 of Sega Saturn's competitors were Sony's PlayStation, which was released a few weeks after, and the Nintendo 64. The SS uses CD-ROMs for its games, and it also contains a cartridge slot for backup memory, or RAM cartridges. Its hardware combined features from several Sega arcade systems, and it has a multi-processor system like those found in arcade machines. Next is the Atari Lynx. Atari Lynx is an 8 or 16-bit handheld game console that was released by Atari Corporation in September 1989 in North America and 1990 in Europe and Japan. It is also the world's first handheld game console to have a color LCD with backlit display, a switchable right-handed, left-handed, upside-down configuration, and the ability to network with up to 15 other units via its Comlink system. At the time, the Lynx's competitors were Game Boy, which was released 2 months earlier, as well as the Sega's Game Gear, and the NEC's TurboExpress. Next is the Game Gear. Game Gear is an 8-bit 4th generation console developed by Sega on October 6, 1990 in Japan, in April 1991 throughout North America and Europe, in 1992 in Australia. At the time, it competed with Nintendo's Game Boy, the Atari Lynx, the NEC's TurboExpress. It has a screen size of 3.2 inches with a display resolution of 160 by 144 pixel density. It can display up to 32 colors at a time and has a frame rate of 59.9 Hz. The screen is backlit so the gamers can play in low lighting situation. Powering it is a 6AA battery that can approximately last 3 to 5 hours. Its system contains an 8KB RAM and additional 16KB video RAM. Some notable games for the Game Gear are Sonic the Hedgehog, the GG Shinobi, Space Harrier, and Land of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. Next is the NEC TurboExpress. The TurboExpress is a handheld video game console developed by NEC Home Electronics in late 1990 in Japan and the United States as a TurboExpress handheld entertainment system. At the time, the TurboExpress's main competitors were Nintendo's Game Boy, Sega's Game Gear, and Atari's Lynx. It sports a similar screen size as the original Game Boy and has an 8KB RAM. So, which one's your favorite? Let us know in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and don't forget to visit yugatech.com/gaming for more news, tips, and tricks. It's your boy Enzo, and stay safe.